Did you know that air quality in a room can affect the way you think and your health? Today we'll speak about carbon dioxide, the fourth most abundant gas in the Earth's atmosphere. Carbon dioxide is found naturally in the atmosphere and it's product of decomposition, ocean release and respiration in the nature. However, human activities generate enormous emissions of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. 87% of all human-produced carbon dioxide emissions come from the burning of fossil fuels like coal, natural gas and oil. The remainder results from the clearing of forests and other land use changes, as well as some industrial processes, such as cement manufacturing. Average concentration of carbon dioxide in ambient air is about 400 ppm, and when I was born, CO2 concentration in the atmosphere was 332 ppm, and I am not very old. 400 ppm is the basic level, so-called fresh air. You find this concentration of CO2 outside in a well-ventilated room. However, the concentration of carbon dioxide can change rapidly in different circumstances. Let us see how concentration of carbon dioxide can build up in a room. All of us produce carbon dioxide when we breathe. Each human exhales about 20 liters per hour or 500 liters of CO2 per day. 500 liters, how much is it actually? I would like to illustrate it using ordinary trash bags. This is 100-liter trash bag. Let's try to inflate it. Finally, this is how 500 liters or approximately 1 kilogram of carbon dioxide looks like. And yes, this is how much you exhale per one day. In a classroom or at the public building, there can be a lot of people simultaneously, and every person exhales about 21 liters of CO2 per hour. So carbon dioxide concentration changes with each breath. For example, in an average class of 20 people, CO2 generation per lesson equals to about 300 liters. In some offices, employers try to save money and put as many people as they can in a small space. At the same time, building owners, pressed by energy efficiency requirements and costs, reduced energy use, including ventilation to a minimum. This results in a situation with a constant increase in CO2 concentrations, with the peak at the end of the working day. Why is CO2 so important? Why bother? Research shows that CO2 has negative impact on our health. Depending on carbon dioxide concentration in the air we breathe, it can give you headache, drowsiness, nausea, and increased heart rate. There are many more negative effects of CO2 on your health. Continuous exposure to elevated levels of carbon dioxide can cause severe damage to your health. Recent experiments in school in Denmark and USA show that students start to complain about bad health symptoms already at 600 ppm concentrations, which is slightly above the basic concentration in the ambient air. Number of complaints and symptom severity significantly increase at 1000 ppm concentration. It was also established a direct correlation to nausea and headache complaints when CO2 levels were over 2000 ppm. Yawning started about 2500 ppm and progressed to some students just laying their heads down around 3000 ppm. According to the US Environmental Protection Agency, indoor air quality directly impacts the student academic performance and health. For example, the Chester School District in Connecticut saw the number of asthma-related health office visits decrease dramatically by 45% in a single year after improving the air quality in their schools. The Hartford School District saw asthma-related incidents decline from about 11,000 to about 9,000 in one school year after improving air quality. A study by the military in South Korea attempted to determine the effect of CO2 levels in sleeping barracks on soldiers' shooting accuracy. Two platoons were put in a separate barracks, one with the windows and vents open, the other with them closed. After a full night's sleep, both platoons participating in shooting accuracy tests. The experiments discovered that the soldiers who slept in well-ventilated barracks had statistically improved shooting accuracy. Actually, the results were so surprising that they switched their platoons the second night, repeated the tests, and found that the platoon in the well-ventilated barracks performance improved, while the other platoon's performance suffered. What about office workers? How do they perform in the bad air conditions? In one study, the researchers exposed office workers to different levels of carbon dioxide for one day. The results of this experiment showed that cognitive scores were 50% lower when the participants were exposed to 1,400 ppm of CO2 compared with 550 ppm during a working day. Another study from Harvard School of Public Health measured a 15% decline of cognitive ability scores at 950 ppm and 50% decline at 1,400 ppm. On the contrary, with lower CO2 levels, employees' test scores improved by up to 12%, and in one of the buildings tested, people walked 60% faster with the reduced CO2 concentrations, completing tests in a mean time of 8.2 minutes, compared with 13.3 minutes with more CO2 in the atmosphere. Italian study discovered that CO2 concentration in classrooms reached up to 3,500 ppm at the end of the lesson. Results of investigations of schools in Norway show that about 23% of schools do not comply with the requirements of air indoor quality. There is a little data about actual situation on indoor air quality in offices, but a few smaller studies show that in more than 20% of offices in European countries, the concentrations of CO2 exceed allowable levels. What about homes? There is very little scientific data about actual CO2 levels in residential buildings. When I was a student, we studied air quality in ordinary Swedish homes. Carbon dioxide levels measured in typical bedroom in typical apartment house reached up to 3,000 ppm by the morning, with doors and windows closed throughout the night. People complained also about dizziness, headache, and drowsiness in the morning. So we can see exposure to moderate to high levels of CO2 can considerably impair our quality of life. What shall we do to avoid such situations? If you live in naturally ventilated house or apartment, make sure you leave door or window open to ensure air circulation. If the house is mechanically ventilated, check if ventilation is working. You can always buy a CO2 sensor and put it in your bedroom and working room. Try to be more outside. If you can walk sitting on the balcony, do it. Take walks outside as often as you can. Same is also valid for office workers. If you feel dizzy, sleepy, drowsy, check with technical personnel if ventilation is working. Ask them to measure CO2 levels at your place. If there is no technical personnel or nobody cares, try to open a window, take frequent breaks outside, or maybe think if you have other options, like working from home or find another work, maybe in the fresh air. Your health is important. Research shows that continuous exposure to 2000 ppm concentrations was linked to inflammatory responses that could lead to a damage to blood vessels. There is also a tentative evidence suggesting that prolonged exposure to levels between 2000 and 3000 ppm is linked to effects including stress, kidney calcification, and bone demineralization. However, sometimes opening windows will not make situation better. It can even make it much more worse. In big cities with a lot of traffic and people, concentrations of CO2 and other gases in the ambient, so-called fresh air, can be much above allowable levels. According to a study from Stanford University, large cities tend to have higher levels of carbon dioxide due to a phenomenon known as CO2 domes. CO2 domes can have a drastic local impact because they worsen the effects of localized air pollutants that cause respiratory diseases. The study lead author estimates that the effect is already causing 300 to 1,000 deaths in American cities each year. Another British study measured CO2 levels along the roads and motorways in the cities. They found out that the carbon dioxide concentration in the air 25 meters away from the road can reach up to 800 ppm. Unfortunately, there is nothing we can do to immediately enhance air quality in such situations. But we all can contribute to better climate on our planet. If you have possibility to choose bike instead of car, do it. If you can walk to your work, do it, regardless of weather. If you can avoid buying products that have been transported from far away across the world, do it as well. Buy better something local, something that does not need to be transported for a long distance, and support local workers. We all need to try to minimize our own footprint every day in hope for better climate for coming generations. I hope you have learned something new today. Please let me know what other topics would be interesting for you, and I'll do a video about it. Thank you.